So please join me in welcoming Anne this evening. I've got quite a few questions for her. I've promised there's no curveball, so I'm not like no crazy journalist. But let's dive in with my first question, which is Anne, can you share a memorable story from your childhood that has had a significant impact on shaping who you are today?
Well, what's jumping out at me right now, the inside of my head is like a technicolor rainstorm the whole time. But what's coming to my mind is a map of the world. And maps have always, since I was a little girl, played a big part in my life. My mother was a nurse. My father was a merchant navy officer. So, and when you have a dad like that, anyone who's got a naval person in their family will know you just grow up with all sorts of stories from all sorts of places. And so at a very early age, I was aware of the world. I mean, I wasn't just living in this little village in this hotel as it happens. I had this sense from as far back as I can remember of where I was in Wales, where Wales was in relation to England, Scotland, Ireland, and the names of the oceans and the continent, as they called it in the 40s and 50s. But my father always had a big map of the world on the sitting room wall. And when he came back from his trips to sea, he used to stand me on a chair in front of this big map. So I would have been, what, 6, 7 to have had the sort of conversations. And he'd say, now, where's Montevideo? And I always had to start from North Wales on the map. That was the rule. And I'd go across to Uruguay, South America, Montevideo, because this was one of the places his ships called in. So that's how you learn. You say, good girl. Now, where are the Gilbert and Ellice Islands? Back to North Wales and going across the South Pacific to the Gilbert and Ellice Islands, which are called something else now, Tuvalu, something. And that's how I, from as far back as I can remember, I had this sense of the world. And he used to say, this is your world, you look after it. And I grew up with that. So that was what came to my mind when you asked that.
And you've written about that in the book, haven't you, with how much your
Oh,
geography
yes,
teacher
yes,
inspired you?
yes. Because when I saw the advertisement for two nurses wanted for Save the Children to go out to Vietnam, this is years later, of course, I thought, I wonder what Save the Children do. Because when we were at Sunday school as kids, we used to give a penny a fortnight or something to the starving children in Africa. And of course, I hadn't thought of Save the Children for years. I was busy at school and training and doing my midwifery training, etc. And I thought, gosh, I wonder what they do with all those pennies. I was called down to London for an interview. I was scared spitless. I was so nervous. But as soon as I walked into the room where we had to wait, for our interview, I immediately relaxed and felt at home because on the wall was a huge map of the world with all sorts of circles and little flags and triangular symbols. And it was showing all the different Save the Children projects that were all over the world. As soon as I saw the map, I instantly felt quite comfortable.
That's
Interesting, isn't it?
No, but also an element of serendipity, isn't it? Because we'll come on to it later that's, where a lot of your career ended up with Save the Children Fund. So I think it'd be interesting for our audience to tell us, what inspired you to pursue a career as a midwife?
Well, it was more as a children's nurse than a midwife. I did my midwifery, of course, because back in the 50s and 60s, you didn't feel as though you were a properly trained nurse unless you did your midwifery immediately after your general training. Are there any nurses in the group listening?
Are there?
No, maybe not.
No, no.
No. Ah, that's all right. Um, Well, my mother was a nurse, and so between her and my father, I had obviously the need to travel was an early thing. But my mother died in tragic circumstances when I was 10. And when I was 16, my father said, well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And I said, I'm going to be a nurse like mummy, and I'm going to travel the world and help people. You know, when you're 16, especially in those days. I said, and I'm going to travel the world like you did, and I'm going to help people. Well, you'd have thought, I was expecting a pat on the back, but no, he went berserk and slammed his fist on the table. And he said, no daughter of mine is going to spend the rest of her life wiping other people's asses, is what he said. And when I started writing, which was not very long ago, so be warned, all of you, don't leave it too late to write like I did, because I was too scared and not confident, It wasn't the ringing endorsement I was hoping for. And it's probably had something to do with my mother's death, the circumstances of my mother's death. But there was a bit of a standoff between father and daughter, because he wouldn't sign the papers consenting for me to train at Manchester Royal Infirmary. Now, there's a sign of the times. That was in 1958. And to go to what was then a prestigious training hospital, you had to have parental consent, which meant your father's consent, which is another sign of the times. God, hasn't the world changed? Thank God.
And
And he wouldn't sign the papers. So I left and went and lived for 3 months with his brother, our favourite Uncle Bob, until he agreed to sign the papers. And then I went off to Manchester to do the nurse training.
what a sign of
So,
resilience. I love it.
pardon?
That's a sign
And I
of
mean,
resilience.
and the training was tough. I mean, it is anyway these days, but it was very different then. And there were times when I wanted to leave, just from the sheer, I thought, I'm not sure this is for me. But it was my pride because of what I'd gone through with my father that kept my nose to the grindstone. And of course, I'm so glad I stuck with it, because it's been a wonderful journey through life. I'm still having it.
Yeah, and that's it for the audience. You're still nursing, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah, which is remarkable. So is there one, I know this is a really difficult question really, to describe one nursing experience that you think has shaped your perspective on life?
Oh my God. Can I just say before I forget, because it's so profound and it's so important for all your ease, what's it called? Ease, your ease.
Yeah.
People. It's said that our world is formed from atoms, but you and I know that it is the stories that each of us have that make it the truly magical place that it is. And that's what my whole life has been about. Is when I saw that saying, I thought, that is so right. That is so right. And each and every one of you, that's aimed at you. So there.
Yes.
Now, what was the question? One story. Oh
Yeah,
my
story
God.
that's shaped the perspective on your life.
Oh, I mean, there are so many. But as we're talking about my nurse training, there was one, well, there are many, but there was one incident and I did write about it. I didn't know I was remembering it. This is the thing, when you start to sit down and really get into the zone to write, that's when I learned all these, especially women, men as well, but women particularly. We're copers, aren't we? We're all raised to be good girls and to manage things, and all that stuff. And you cope with whatever life throws at you. and some of it's tragic, some of it's wonderful, some of it's hurtful. All sorts of things can happen and do. So where does all that coping go? And that's when I eventually got round to sitting quietly and tapping into that inner and listening to that inner voice. That's what we don't do really traditionally, is it? We're so busy charging through life. We don't give ourselves time to listen to that inner voice. And it was sitting at the kitchen table, struggling to find a way to start writing these stories down, that I realized that inside me, I can only speak about myself, was this deep, deep well of extraordinary memories that I didn't know I had. I didn't know I was remembering things long forgotten. And that was a real revelation. As we're, I'll go back to nursing. I was a second year, just going into my second year of nursing. So I was 19. I didn't know anything about anything. But you're dressed in your nurse's uniform. So it's a bit scary because the patients think you're a proper nurse. You're not really, you don't know what you're doing when you're in your food. It was very busy and we were short staffed. Nothing's changed there. And the sister said, go and relieve staff nurse in side ward 2. And then at the end of the ward, there were 2 side rooms, and that's where people who were dying were put. So a junior nurse like myself would never ever normally go into a side room because they were very ill people in there. Anyway, I was thrust in, and this staff nurse, the patient was a woman dying of cancer. And in those days, 19 ghastly cancers that you don't see in this country anymore. Because of techniques have changed and investigations are so thorough and early, those horrible cancers that we used to see. The room was stinking of, it was cancer. That was the first time I ever smelt cancer. And it's a smell that you never forget. The staff nurse, who was a senior staff nurse, she took no notice of me. She just said, it's about time. I'm taking 45 minutes. And she started to walk out. And I said, can you tell me something about the patient? And she said, read the notes. And off she went. And the lady, Miss Hughes, I'll never forget her name. You never forget in life the first of anything, do you? She was the first time I'd come across cancer. And she was a pharmacist. And I was astonished that this woman in the bed was a pharmacist. I thought, gosh, she must be so clever to be a chemist, I suppose. You see, that's a sign of the times, 1959. I'd never dreamt that a woman could be a chemist, pharmacist. Isn't that amazing? And I drew up a chair and sat talking to her because instinctively I knew that that's what you did. That's what she needed. She was in terrible pain, and she was sorry about this, but this is you can imagine how shocking it was for me. She was vomiting feces. Now that's the cancer was eating into her bowel, and this was 1959. Nobody needs to be frightened that cancer's like that today. Well, imagine me as a 19-year-old. I mean, you couldn't in your worst nightmares have imagined anything like this. And I didn't put a mask on. I noticed the staff nurse had a mask on. That was to hide, her. Anyway. And this woman was you can imagine, was in desperate pain. And in those days, diamorphine was given for pain, Omnipon, diamorphine. And it was very strictly controlled. And they were allowed, even someone in this state was given a small dose every 4 hours. That was absolutely the regime there. And you couldn't give it at 3.5 hours, no matter how much pain the patient was in, because the obsession with the medical addiction in the patient. I didn't know any of this. I was still very much learning. And she was begging for the pain. Relief wasn't due for another hour. And she started cajoling and wheedling and begging, and then she started shouting and abusing me. Call yourself a nurse. This is because I kept making excuses to not give her the morphine. I wouldn't have been allowed to anyway. I was too junior. And it was so upsetting. I went to the sister in the office to say, Miss Hughes is in desperate pain. And she's begging, she's shouting, you can probably hear her, she's screaming for pain relief. And the sister said, you know as well as I do, she can't have it, she's not due till, it was something like 45 minutes by then. And a consultant walked in while we were having this conversation. And remember, in those days, we were terrified of the sisters. You didn't say boo to them. I mean, again, a sign of the times. And he heard me saying, this woman is, I can't go back in. She's in such a state, needing something for pain, and she's vomiting feces. That can't be, something's got to be done. And the consultant just brushed past me and he said, are you the junior? And I said, yes. And he said, well, you shouldn't be in that room. Sister, she shouldn't be in that room. She's too young for this. And he said, he turned to me and he said, of course she can't have pain relief. It's not due. And that's how it was in those days. And this was my very first experience of that sort of scenario. Sorry to go on a bit, but that's how much it stayed with me. And when I washed her, I bathed her, I freshened her up, I looked in the little metal bedside cabinet, and there wasn't much in there. There was a hairbrush and a comb, I think, and a little bottle of California poppy eau de cologne. And she wasn't allowed to have morphine. And you know what poppies give? They give morphine. And the irony of that, I can just see that little bottle of eau de cologne called California poppies, and I put it on her wrists and on her neck. And I was just desperately playing for time because she desperately needed this medication. And I tell you, when this staff nurse came back, I felt as though with that experience, I remember thinking, could there be nurses who didn't care? Because that staff nurse certainly didn't show much care either for the patient or for me. And that was a sort of revelation, really. It was a marker in time that I remember very clearly now. Could there possibly be nurses who didn't care? Because I was still very naive and thought, anyone in the nurse's uniform was like an angel or something. I went into that room, a student nurse, a 19-year-old green student nurse, and I came out of it a much wiser person. I learned a lot relieving that staff nurse for her lunch. Wasn't that an amazing little scenario?
Well, it is, and it's one of hundreds that you've got, Anne. And I mean, it oozes out of you, the amount of passion and love and care that you share, with strangers, never mind patients. I mean, that's what when I speak to people about you, I just say it's like a guardian angel has arrived in the room. And I really, I
You
suppose.
need to get out more, Tanya.
Yes. So moving on to the next question. Out across the 8 decades, what would you say is one of your biggest challenges that you faced?
Oh. Keeping my sense of humor. I always say to people, the only thing my father left me was his sense of humor. And I'm grateful for that every day. I think in some of the terrible things I've witnessed of what human beings can do to other human beings, hanging on to your whatever it is that makes you, you know what I mean? There are times when the horror or the anger or the shock can be so overwhelming, it almost can get the better of you and reduce you to the level of what you're witnessing. And well, I can't describe something that's I'm thinking about right now, but most of us go through life, with a line that, okay, there's a few ups and downs, but if you push yourself like nurses, doctors, soldiers, let's say, do, priests maybe, who experience the highs and maybe the lows, and the highs get higher and the lows get lower, that sort of life. Most of us aren't exposed to such extremes. I have been exposed to extremes, and I haven't liked what I've seen when I'm in those extremes. And you could say at the spectrum of the extremes I'm talking about, you could say at one end of the spectrum, you'd expect to be a nurse, to be like the Mother Teresa coming out in you, and the other extreme would be the Hitler coming out. Well, what has come out in me on 2 occasions that I can think of very graphically, but won't speak of now, is the Hitler came out. And if I had a gun or a knife at that moment, I could have done what that soldier did to both times it involved children. So that's very,
Sorry.
that's what I mean about there are times when it can be very, very difficult, but I spent at the time I have been able to be true to myself, let's say. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, you're having to dig deep for strength of character, haven't you?
I mean, I don't know if some people here may not be aware that I've nursed in war zones and areas of conflict and deprivation, but I'm not really a nutcase. It's just what I've witnessed.
Yeah, I suppose it'd be nice for you to tell us a bit about, the leap that you took from Vietnam and Cambodia. What are some of your, fondest moments? Because through the book, there's always some element of joy. You see I suppose every cloud is a silver lining. Like I loved the story of the soldiers taking you to a makeshift cinema. And
Oh, that was, yeah, up on the roof of the Holy Family Hospital, run by American nuns in the middle of Vietnam. Once a week, they showed films on the roof of the Holy Family. And the first film I saw there was Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway in Bonnie and Clyde. And it hadn't been on general release yet. Hollywood would send the latest films out for the soldiers to have a look at. Extraordinary experience. I thought everyone at home is worried, sick, thinking I'm in the middle of a war zone. Well, I am, but they'd never guess I was sitting on a recline on a roof with tracers, and bombs going off in the background. We were watching extreme violence in this amazing film where the real thing was going on, around us. Surreal, I suppose, is the word, isn't it?
Yeah, someone just
Surreal.
Shona just mentioned that some
Hard to
surreal
believe.
stories. But sorry, your sound is breaking up a little bit, so apologies everybody who's trying to tune in, but we'll get there from the powers of Wi-Fi. But yes, it was like that one situation, wasn't it? Were you watching a theatre show or something, and there was like a gas bomb that went off, but it was almost once they cleared it and everything,
Oh God, yes.
you just went back
Yeah,
in and watched the
that
rest
was
of
up
it.
in that was up in the mountains. That was the second tour of duty I did in Vietnam, up in the Central Highlands. I was at a bush hospital up in a beautiful place called Kon Tum. It was a different kind of war up there. The soldiers were all special forces rather than regular army, infantry, and so on. And it was more like guerrilla warfare. Anyway, we being 3 Western nurses were invited to a concert, a show at a special forces base. And I'd only been there a week. I mean, I'd been in Vietnam for 2 years, but this second tour of duty, I'd only been there a week. And we were shown into this, when you're a civilian, they used to call us round eyes. There were very few white Western women, let's say. So you got a lot of attention, wanted or not, from thousands of soldiers, let's say. You were assigned an officer, a young officer. Each of us was assigned a young officer to look after you. They were real gentlemen and treated you well, but they were there really to protect you. And we were sitting in the hall, and these shows that they put on for the troops, these are American troops. Most of them you couldn't see because they were stripped. God knows what went on. But the odd show we would be invited to. And this was mainly a third-rate South Korean rock band. I mean, God, they were awful. But, in a war zone, it's amazing what you call entertainment. And we were halfway through when suddenly the young officer next to me, who was assigned to me, pushed my head forward, put his hand over my mouth. I thought, Christ, what's this? And the same thing was happening to the other 2 nurses, one of whom was a nun, a nursing nun, American nun. And they more or less picked us up by our shirt and ran us out of the hall. And what had happened was some of the South Vietnamese soldiers who had not allowed into this show had thrown some CS gas grenades, tear gas grenades, through the back windows. There weren't really windows, they were bamboo and thatch buildings, a space for a window. And they chucked in CS gas grenades just for a laugh. Well, we by the time we got out of the main doorway entrance, our eyes were streaming, and they quickly set up huge blowers. It's the only way I can describe them, like huge fans, but huge, to blow this CS gas off us. Then they took us into the officers' mess nearby, which was another bamboo and thatch building, for a drink and a calm down. And we were talking, am I going on too long?
No, it's interesting.
We were sitting having a drink with a nun, an American nun, and an Australian nurse, and myself, and our escorts. who were being very polite and making polite conversation. And there were other soldiers. Now, remember, we're up in the mountains and there's a guerrilla war going on. So some of these men are not really quite the full shilling, you know, they're shell-shocked and they live life in a different way. And this major came over and sat opposite us and was spinning us some kind of yarn, you know, trying to impress us. He was bald, or his head was shaved. And as he was talking to us, a tall sergeant, Negro sergeant, walked up behind him and he was smoking a cigar and staring at us. And he inhaled, on not taking the cigar out, on the bald head of the major, who didn't flicker with his whatever tail it was he was trying to impress us with. And we could smell burning flesh. I mean, his head was burning. I mean, it was blistering, and that's how you know these guys are not really, you know, quite normal. They were special forces. If any of you have known any special forces, they are a breed apart. Anyway, the major finished his story and then he just said, "Excuse me, ladies," and he stood up. He turned round and he planted a punch. It was like something out of a cartoon, you know, where somebody's body arches backwards and knocked this sergeant flying with one punch. And the sergeant's body kind of crashed into the bamboo and thatch back wall and brought the whole of the bar area down. So our escorts just picked up our drinks, took our elbow, and just showed us into the next room, where we could hear this fight going on next door. So we'd been gassed. We'd seen this burning incident, and anyway, we were shown back in the hall. The concert carried on, and at the end, the young lieutenant who was looking after me, he started talking about dogs and how he knew the British were great dog lovers, as was he. And he told me he grew up on a farm in Idaho and how many dogs they had. And he said, "I'm a dog handler here. We've got some very strong dogs. Would you like to see one?" I thought, well, it makes a difference from just come and see my etchings, doesn't it? So I went with him and he took me to this hooch, as they called it. And being a gentleman, he showed me through the door first. And I just had time to see this black Alsatian, huge Alsatian dog. Someone had slipped its chain and it just leapt right at me. I had room to take one step backwards before it hit me in the abdomen, completely winded me, and took the front of my dress out with its teeth. I mean, and the young lieutenant took his gun out and shot the dog. Brains went all over the room. I mean, that was one hell of an evening, that.
And honestly, you've got to read the book. It's just, and the chapters are, I love the way she's written it because the chapters are quite succinct and short. So I said sometimes when I just need a bit of you're doing your work, you need a break. Some of us would maybe, I don't know, go for a walk, do some cleaning. I'm like, I got to get into Anne's book because it just brings you back down to earth with a bang. Because you think,
and when we went back to our hospital where we worked, to Pat Smith's hospital, she was the woman doctor we worked for. She gave me hell, and she gave the soldiers hell because they'd shot the dog. She said, well, now she's got to have all her rabies shots, because normally you would keep a dog for several days to see if it's rabid or not. So then I had to have the 14 rabies shots. I thought, I'm not having a night out here again. You can only cope with so much, can't you? But it was very funny afterwards. Not at the time, though.
Another lovely story I chuckled at was you going to the library. That blew my mind that there was a library.
Yeah, to just pluck these stories out of the air and try to tell them, it's difficult because
Yeah.
it's quite long to set the scene. But this was in the Vietnam again, Quy Nhon. And I was walking from our children's centre. We ran a rehabilitation centre for war wounded children. And the evacuation hospital, row books and so on and so forth. And this particular day, I just wanted to stretch my legs and just walk. It was about a 15-minute walk along a dusty road through a refugee camp. I mean, it wasn't very pleasant. And I thought, gosh, it's a bit quiet. But, you know, when you're tired and you've been working hard with wounded children, you just, well, your mind's in a different zone, really. I was walking along with a pile of books under my arm, and a jeep pulled up, and the young lieutenant behind the wheel said, "Begging your pardon, ma'am, what the hell are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I'm on my way to the library at the 57. He said, "Are you aware that we're on red alert?" He said, "Get in." I jumped into the, and he drove me to the base where everyone was on full alert, which won't go into now what that meant, but it was pretty serious. Yeah, I was just going to get some books, fresh books,
How'd you
take
do?
back.
So that leads me on to, what inspired you to start writing a memoir?
I wasn't inspired at all. People were for 20 years were trying to get me to write stories down. And I thought, you only do that when you're old, don't you? Because you don't say to yourself, "Well, I can't do that." Write a book. That's much too hard. It's too big a mountain to climb that. And I thought, I can't do that. Who's going to read it? Who's going to want to read that? But it went on and on and on for years. And I looked in the mirror one day and thought, yes, well, now might be a good time. Plus, my younger sister had said, Anne, when you die, all these stories will die with you. What a shame that would be. Now, a sister can say that to you quietly. And it sat in my head for a while. And I thought, yeah, she's right. I'll give it a go. So I changed the type of nursing I was doing to quieten myself down a bit and not be so, what shall I say, all my energy going into the sort of nursing I seem to thrive on, trauma nursing. And one day I just decided I'd give it a go. And I thought, well, what do I know about children in war? And that set me off. I thought, oh, I'll write about Bar and the incident on the plane. And then I'll write the yellow ribbon story, the story I call the yellow ribbon. And I just took a child and wrote that child's story. And before I knew it, I'd written about 10 children and there were 10 chapters. And I thought, oh, and then once that started, it almost wrote itself. I mean, I did resign my job in London and I rented a little cottage in Devon near my sister and her family, to sort of quieten my life down a bit. And that's where I really started to write. And it was quite a revelation, really.
How old were you when you
That's,
started writing?
oh my God, it was only 15 years ago. So
Seven. Were you
whatever it
70?
was, 70 something.
Yeah.
Oh, so 70, yeah, late 60s.
Well,
That's why I urge all of you, do it now. Don't wait for as long as I did.
it gives us all hope, doesn't it? You don't, because you do hear about a lot of writers who are young and they get a break and a literary agent and an editor comes along, and it doesn't sometimes work out like that. I mean, you know, you've written your second memoir. I haven't read that yet, and now you're writing your third. So do you have a certain ritual or practice to get to the
No,
no, she says, just,
no,
you know.
no. I've well, I say I've finished book three. It's such as it is. It's with the agents, but it's been with the agent now for about 8 months, and there's been a bit of a hiccup, which they're not communicating very clearly. But I think I know what it is. It focuses on the Middle East, and a large part of the Middle East I've written a section on Israel, and of course the world has changed. That part of the world has changed since October 7th, this last October 7th. So I've got caught up in the politics because some of the stories I've written about are pretty rough. There are good ones as well.
So what motivates you to keep, you know, I learning and growing, you know, in your eighth decade? What's the secret?
Well, I don't know. I've learned so much along the way. I'm absolutely bursting with lessons learned, as you can imagine. And what jumps out at me, and always has, or certainly does now, is our shared humanity. I mean, I've nursed in the Middle East. I've lived with the Inuit up in the Canadian Arctic, in the Australian desert with the First Nation Australians. I've learned so much from so many different cultures. But we're all the same under the skin. The cultures might differ, the food differs, but we're all the same under the skin. And, you know, going back to my midwifery training, I was 22, just. And every time, even then, I don't know, you'd hold this new little life in your hands, this slithering, you know, purple, hopefully turning pink soon as he cries, little body. The umbilical cord isn't cut yet. And I used to think, God, there's nothing more innocent than this new little boy or little girl. Will only ever know what adults put into it, teach this new little life. Joy, sorrow, greed, sharing, compassion. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that an amazing thought? And every little baby arrives the same way, whatever its creed, colour, culture, part of the world. And yet, well, there are what, 8.5 billion people on the planet now? There has to be a different way to run this world, to manage this world, because it doesn't seem to be working very well at the moment, does it? I
So,
don't know.
yeah.
Whoever's got the answer better come up with it quick.
So, but coming to the close of the hour, do you have any dreams? And if so, what are they?
I'm going to sound like the Miss World contestants. World peace. Sounds trite, doesn't it? Why can't we all get on? I don't understand. You know, you like my sayings, don't you?
Quotes.
Well, the adage that I live by or try to is, and I've jotted it down so I didn't forget. I say to myself that part of being human is rolling up your sleeves and taking an active part in repairing harm. That's very simple to understand, but it doesn't seem to be that simple for everyone to do. I mean, with all my travels, I've met some extraordinary people. And in the darkest of places, you meet, well, these people who are just quietly shining a light into dark corners and just quietly raising their children in the most difficult of circumstances. It'll be going on in Gaza, it'll be going on in Ukraine. The same stories come up wherever. And the humor, there's a lot of humor. It's not just death and destruction and sadness and tragedy. There's enough of that. But there's fun, and there are jokes, and there are optimists, and there are kind, compassionate soldiers amongst those that are not kind and compassionate. There's so much going on, and all the nuances of human beings and the way they live life, the way they look at life. It's all there. It's absolutely fascinating. I find it endlessly fascinating. I can tell you a funny story if you want one. Got
That'd be
lots.
nice. Yeah.
This is in 2018, so not a million miles, back in the day sort of thing. Fairly recent, is it? Yeah, it is to me. I went to Amman, Jordan, because I wanted to visit a refugee camp to do a comparative study between a refugee camp then, like now, or more recently, and compare it to the refugee camp I was at in Thailand and Cambodia in 1979-80. And Amman was the safest country to go to at that time. Anyway, I travelled, it was a late flight. I arrived at something like 1 o'clock in the morning, got to my hotel, which was really like a little B&B in the middle of Amman. Had a restless night because it was so hot. And I had an appointment at 10 o'clock the next morning. Well, when you make these appointments in London, you sort of, I didn't figure in the terrible traffic between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. in downtown Amman. I had to get to what turned out to be the other side of the city, and I couldn't be late because I was being I was applying for a security card to get me into the refugee camp that I was going to visit. So I had to be there at 10 a.m. So I was under a lot of pressure. So I ran out of the hotel. Now, normally I would have got them to get me a taxi, but it was a lengthy business. So I just went into the traffic and waved the first taxi that I saw down, which you wouldn't normally do. It screeched to a halt, and that's when I realized it was a bit battered. And the driver was a bit battered as well. He was an older man with henna in his beard, and he had his keffiyeh on. And he only spoke Arabic. Fair enough, we're in Jordan. So it resurrected my rusty Arabic. And so we negotiated a price that I was happy with. He wasn't so happy with it. And I jumped in and off we went. And that's when I realized just how battered the taxi was, because there was a hole in the floor and I could see the road beneath my feet. I thought, oh God, hope I get there in one piece. Anyway, he asked me if I was American, enta americana, madame. And normally I would have said, no, la Ana Inglesia. But I thought, oh, I'll push my Arabic a bit. So I said in Arabic, no, I'm from Wales. And you know what he did? He took his both hands off the steering wheel, not very good, in man traffic. And he went, he let out a loud whoop, which I won't do now and scare you. And he said, Gareth Bale, #1. Isn't that lovely? And that's what I call our shared humanity. No matter where you are, something like football will.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And there are lots of incidents, similar. And
There are.
that to me is what makes this world what it is. It's just amazing.
It's lovely. The local global connection. Well, we've got a few questions if everybody's all right for time. Sean Ed's just asked, what is Anne's favourite book if you're only allowed to pick one?
Oh my God.
Good question.
Well, I tell you, one of my favourite books, if I'd known you were going to ask that, I would have got, I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere. It's a book called Letters to My Grandchildren, and it's written by Anthony Wedgwood Benn, the politician who died a few years ago. And I pick that book up and put it down quite often. And I did write down something. He says that each and every one of us should tell our children, our grandchildren or teenagers, as you go through life, there are 4 questions that you should ask yourself and encourage them to ask those questions. As you go through life, ask number 1, who gave one person the right to harm another? Question 2, what's going on? Question 3, why is it going on? And question 4, what can I do about it? Or what can we do about it? Isn't that, and his book is full of little, I mean, I so wish that my father had said that to me when I was 16. But my life has been really asking these questions and meeting them head on. But I didn't know that till I read his book. It's a very thin book. It's a little paperback. And it's called
Lovely.
Letters to My Grandchildren. It's a wonderful little book. I recommend it.
Thank you, Anne. That's brilliant. Emma Galvin is asking, you say not to leave it as late as you did to get writing, but I wonder if you feel you're able to look back now with a certain degree of hindsight, wisdom, reflection that wouldn't have been there at the time things had happened. What has been your favorite place to travel to and your least favorite?
I think it's very difficult. To me, places are people. But and I've never been tempted to emigrate and live somewhere else. This is my home and this is where I live, even though I haven't got a home. I mean, I haven't got bricks and mortar, but I'm not someone who gathers stuff, you know. I'm free-spirited.
But that's another amazing part of you, isn't it? You've never owned a home. You've
Oh
just
God, no, I wouldn't know what to do with it. No. No, wherever I am is where I live. That's it. I've always been like that. And I don't have stuff. Well, I've got a laptop and a hairbrush. That's about it. The toothbrush. Don't need much. I would say Lebanon is close to. I loved it there. Well, I loved it geographically because although it's the Middle East, they used to call it the Switzerland of the Middle East. It's very green. It's verdant. It's got waterfalls, rushing rivers. It's completely different from Syria, Israel, Iraq, all the countries surrounding it. Quite an extraordinary country. The political situation when I was there was not good, and it's worse now. I was there during the Israeli occupation of the 80s, so it was not good. But I loved the people and I loved the geography of the place. And a lot of it reminded me of North Wales. I think that's obviously what it was. But it has a Mediterranean climate, beautiful beaches, white sand, the Mediterranean, lovely fish restaurants. Yes, I could have lived there if the war hadn't been going on. You know, the worst one, I don't know. Thailand, only because of what I was doing there. I was in a refugee camp of 43,000 people. Again, I met 2 of the most extraordinary people there that I'm still in touch with. But the human deprivation and the suffering and the these are the victims of Pol Pot. I've never seen anything on that scale. I had never seen anything on that scale before or since. And I wouldn't want to repeat. I've deliberately not gone to any of that sort of scenario since, because it was deeply shocking to see. Can I just say something that it is said that there are 3 types of people in this world. You've probably heard this. Those who wait for something to happen, those who make something happen, and those who don't know anything's happened even after it's happened. So all you rage on the page and ease retreat people, which group do you think you belong to? You're the middle group, aren't you?
Yeah, too
You
right.
make things happen. But I love those 3 categories because it's so true.
I mean, you've got a 4th book in you, haven't you? The book of quotes by
Well,
Anne.
I'd like to try my hand at fiction because I've got so much material. I've got endless stories, but it's a strain writing, not, well, you know, non-fiction, because you've got to check dates, you've got to try and get permission, you've got to get it right. And I have always seen my writing as a tribute to those I've worked with, to those I've nursed, to those people I've learned the most amazing life lessons from. And that sets the bar high. I did that for myself, otherwise I couldn't have done it. But now that I've got these 3 huge sections of my working life out there, I'd like to try fiction.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's one other question. I think after your first experience of working in Vietnam, where's it gone now? What inspired you to return to other places even after those tough experiences?
I didn't go from one war to another war to another war because you can't do that. Although some people do that and they end up making themselves ill, worse. I'm not very good at routine. Well, I'm living it now, but I think, well, I think best on my feet. I'm a good emergency room nurse, trauma nurse. I can react quickly to, so that's why I was that sort of nurse. I think when your curriculum vitae starts looking a certain way, when you apply for jobs that, like maybe a ward sister in Cheltenham or wherever, London, I think it probably scares the people you're applying to, because they say, good heavens, have you thought of applying to the Red Cross or to Oxfam, or and you start being channeled into the same sort of situations, because not many people can cope with working in a war zone, and rightly so. It's a very extraordinary thing to do, but I don't know, it's just, I think of my life as a river, it meanders. Sometimes it's rippling along on a sunny day, and sometimes it's cascading over rocks, and there are weirs and rapids and white water, and but it's always been between the banks, it's always one thing's led to another, one thing's led to another. But I've done things like climbed up to Everest base camp and gloried in the magnificence of the Himalayas. That was in 1970. I crewed on a sailboat, a 50-foot ketch, for 10 months in the Pacific and the Caribbean. I've done more normal, wonderful things. But I suppose there's still experiences of extremes, aren't they? I don't know.
Well,
Blame my father.
yeah, and it's like that. We'll end with this that you know you loved watching the series by Martin Clunes
Oh, yes.
that share with the
Did
audience
any of
was
you
the one.
watch that? The Pacific Islands. It was on television recently. Did any of you see it?
I watched.
Oh, well, it's on whatever catch-up thing it's on. ITVX, I think. It's well worth watching. And it's only 3 parts, but in the third part, he visited an island called Palau. And I thought, now that's somewhere I need to go. A small Pacific island. They don't have any tourists. Oh, so they probably wouldn't let me in, would they? I'd have to pretend to be something else. And you sign a pledge at the immigration, and if you refuse to sign it, they won't let you in. And you pledge to, oh, I can't remember. It's a very poetic sort of list of things, but it finishes with, I pledge to that the only footprints I shall leave in Palau can be washed away by the ocean, something like that. I thought, I like the sound of that place.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure, Anne. Thank you so much for your time. And I know from the statements in the chat from the audience, they could listen to you for hours. One lady said that she would love to hear more about the lessons learned. Maybe that could be the title of one of your next books. Yes, there is. I suppose it would just be, is there one message of wisdom that you would like to leave us all with?
Oh my God, why didn't you warn me about all this? Well, now, one of the 2 Cambodian refugees that I'm still in touch with, Vichita, she was a child soldier, like a lot of them were. She now has her own charity. She's a lawyer. She got a law degree. She's a global ambassador who exposes human traffickers, how to recognize children and women who've been trafficked. And she inspires me every day. And 3 years ago, I gave a talk at a boys' school near here. And it's part of a project they were doing. So they invited me to be the speaker. These were, if I say 6th form schoolboys, that dates me, doesn't it? Whatever grade that is. There were 16, 17-year-olds. And I sent Vic Vichitar an email to Cambodia, and I said, I'm going to be speaking to a group of students, high school students, and I'm going to tell them your story. It's a hell of a story. I didn't say that to her, I'm saying that to you. And I said, have you got a message for them? And she sent me this incredible email back, and I wrote some of it down. It was too long to read out, but I read it out to these boys after telling them what she had gone through and what the Cambodians had gone through. And this was her message to them. She said, tell them to never stop learning. And when they go out into their country or the wider world, to be the very best that they can be in whatever career they choose. They will make a difference, both to themselves and to those around them. And she said, please give them my best wishes and my love, and tell them that the learning never stops. Isn't that amazing? Someone who survived what she survived. And that would be my message. The learning never stops.
Beautiful. Thank you, Anne. It's always a pleasure. Hopefully this won't be our last Q&A, because I know there's lots more people who would love to listen to your stories.
There's plenty of them.
Yeah. Well, take care of yourself. Thank you, everyone that's joined us this evening. If you want to join Journal with Ease, it's a Thursday 45-minute guided journaling workshop that I run for free for anyone who wants to dip their toe into journaling. Anne is usually present with us, so it's one opportunity to learn more and hear more of her wisdom. But yeah, until the next time, take care and stay safe.